The morning episode of The View was supposed to be a routine blend of celebrity interviews, spirited discussions, and light entertainment, but it quickly turned into an unforgettable clash that left viewers stunned. Lindsay Lohan, long known as both a Hollywood starlet and a magnet for controversy, sat at the table alongside co-hosts Whoopi Goldberg, Sunny Hostin, Sarah Haynes, and Joy Behar. For most of the introduction, things seemed calm enough, with applause from the audience as Lohan smiled and waved. However, beneath the polished exterior, a storm was brewing, and before the segment was over, it would erupt into a fiery confrontation that ended with Lindsay walking off the set. From the moment Joy Behar began questioning Lohan, there was tension in the air. Known for her sharp tongue and biting wit, Behar wasted no time diving into pointed topics. She brought up Lohan's highly publicized struggles with addiction, past arrests, and turbulent career choices. While the question was framed as concern, it carried an edge that made the audience lean forward. Lohan's smile faltered, and instead of answering directly, she paused, adjusted her seat, and responded carefully. She noted she had moved past those times, but her tone suggested she was already irritated. Joy, however, pressed harder. She asked whether the public could ever truly trust Lohan again, given her history of broken promises about comebacks. The studio audience reacted with a mix of gasps and murmurs, sensing the question struck a nerve. Lindsay responded firmly that she was no longer the troubled young woman tabloids loved to sensationalize. She said she had matured, rebuilt her life, and wanted the focus to be on her new projects. The tension grew heavier, as Joy smirked slightly, leaning back in her chair, signaling she wasn't convinced. At this point, Whoopi Goldberg tried to step in, redirecting the conversation toward Lindsay's current career, specifically her new ventures in acting and business. For a brief moment, Lohan lit up, speaking passionately about her return to film and her work behind the scenes in production. The audience applauded, clearly excited to hear about her fresh start. But before she could elaborate further, Joy interjected again with a cutting remark about Hollywood being full of second chances that rarely last. The tension shot back up instantly, erasing the progress. Lindsay's body language shifted noticeably. She leaned back, crossed her arms, and gave Joy a long, cold stare. Her voice became sharper as she replied, reminding Joy that everyone makes mistakes, but not everyone's struggles are broadcast to the world. She pointed out how unfair it was to reduce her entire career to a few rough years when she had been acting since childhood and had made countless contributions to film and television. The audience applauded in support, but Joy wasn't done. Joy, unfazed by Lindsay's defense, leaned forward and said bluntly that accountability was not optional in Hollywood. She questioned whether Lindsay's return to the spotlight was motivated by passion or by desperation to stay relevant. The comment drew a sharp reaction from the crowd, with some booing while others cheered at the tough line of questioning. Lindsay's jaw tightened as she stared directly at Joy. With measured words, she said she was not desperate, she was driven, and that she had worked tirelessly to build her new reputation. Her tone was calm but edged with defiance, signaling the clash was reaching dangerous territory. Sunny Hostin attempted to mediate, offering a softer question about how Lindsay balanced her personal growth with public expectations. Lindsay's shoulders relaxed briefly as she explained how therapy, family support, and time away from Hollywood had helped her reset. She stressed that she wanted to be seen as a professional, not as a tabloid character. The audience applauded warmly, sensing her sincerity. But Joy cut in again, dismissing the narrative as PR spin and asking why people should believe her this time when they had been disappointed before. That remark was the spark that lit the flame. Lindsay's expression hardened, and her voice dropped an octave, carrying both calmness and fury. She responded that Joy had no right to question her authenticity when she didn't know her personally. She added that her mistakes had been magnified unfairly, and that it was cruel to repeatedly drag her past into every conversation. The room grew tense, with even Whoopi visibly shifting uncomfortably in her chair. The confrontation had turned personal, and the air was thick with discomfort. As the conversation spiraled, Joy smirked and said Lindsay should be prepared for tough questions if she wanted to be in the public eye again. This statement struck Lindsay as condescending. She leaned forward, looked Joy directly in the eye, and said she wasn't afraid of tough questions, but she expected respect. The audience erupted in applause, supporting her stance. Volatile laughter wasn't an option here. It was clear this was no longer playful banter but a battle of wills between two strong personalities unwilling to back down. Whoopi tried again to shift the subject toward Lindsay's new Netflix film, attempting to rescue the segment. Lindsay smiled faintly, thanking Whoopi, but as she began to explain the storyline and her excitement for the project, Joy interrupted once more, asking if Hollywood only gave her the role as a stunt for publicity. The crowd audibly groaned at the remark. Lindsay's face went pale with anger. She took a long pause before speaking, choosing her words with precision. She said she had earned every opportunity through hard work and talent, not pity or gimmicks. The energy in the room was now electric, with the audience caught between gasps, applause, and murmurs. Joy leaned back, arms folded, appearing unfazed, but the tension was undeniable. Lindsay's voice grew firmer as she listed her recent achievements, including her business ventures, charity work, and years of sobriety. She emphasized that she was proud of her progress and that Joy's attempts to undermine her wouldn't change her reality. The crowd clapped again, louder this time, showing support for Lindsay's resilience. Joy, unwilling to concede, responded with a sarcastic tone, saying, "Well, we've heard this all before." The audience booed lightly, and Lindsay's composure cracked for the first time. She leaned in closer, eyes blazing, and said, "You don't know me, Joy. You only know the headlines." Her voice carried raw emotion, and the studio fell silent. Even the co-hosts seemed unsure how to proceed. Joy tried to laugh it off, but Lindsay wasn't smiling. Instead, her hands gripped the table as if holding back her frustration. Sarah Haynes cautiously stepped in, changing the topic to Lindsay's life abroad and her business projects in Dubai and Greece. Lindsay softened, speaking passionately about creating stability away from the Hollywood chaos. She described building a new life that allowed her peace and balance. The audience listened intently, relieved at the calmer tone. But Joy couldn't resist one more jab, asking if Lindsay had simply run away from accountability by leaving the United States. The crowd gasped again, and Lindsay's patience finally snapped. Lindsay turned her entire body toward Joy, locking eyes with her. Her voice was steady but laced with anger as she said, "I didn't run away. I chose peace. There's a difference." The studio audience erupted into applause, many standing to cheer her strength. Joy smirked again, but this time her expression seemed slightly shaken. Lindsay then added, "I came here to share my story, not to be insulted." The crowd cheered louder, clearly siding with her. The tension had reached a boiling point. Joy attempted to continue, but Lindsay cut her off. She said firmly, "You don't get to rewrite my story for me." The audience broke into applause again, and for a brief moment, Joy looked taken aback. Whoopi intervened again, urging everyone to move forward, but the damage was done. Lindsay's composure was slipping, and it was clear she was no longer interested in salvaging the conversation. Instead, she was preparing for a dramatic stand, one that would leave the show in chaos. The atmosphere in the studio was now so tense that every word felt heavier than it should. Joy tried to laugh off Lindsay's retort and move to her cue cards, but the moment had already escaped her control. Lindsay looked toward the audience and said calmly that she was tired of being judged by people who didn't know her and who only saw her through the lens of scandals. The crowd cheered loudly, sensing a moment of honesty and raw emotion. Joy raised her eyebrows, clearly unwilling to admit defeat, but the applause drowned her out. At this point, Lindsay's tone grew more personal. She spoke about how difficult it had been to rebuild her life after years of headlines tearing her apart. She explained that she had lost friends, opportunities, and even her sense of self because of the relentless judgment. Yet she stood there now as someone stronger, someone determined to keep going. The crowd gave her a standing ovation. Joy shifted uncomfortably, perhaps realizing her approach had backfired, but she quickly tried to interject once more. Joy leaned in and said that celebrities who choose the spotlight should expect scrutiny, adding that if Lindsay couldn't handle the pressure, maybe she shouldn't be on shows like The View. The audience gasped in disbelief, with scattered boos echoing across the studio. Lindsay shook her head and smiled coldly. She replied, "I can handle pressure, but I won't accept disrespect." The line drew thunderous applause, and several audience members shouted words of support. The battle lines were drawn, and Lindsay was clearly winning the crowd. Whoopi, sensing the confrontation had reached its peak, tried desperately to mediate again, but Lindsay wasn't interested in softening her words anymore. She said that it was exhausting to constantly be reduced to a punchline when she had worked so hard to rebuild her life. She explained that she had turned her pain into lessons and her lessons into strength. Her voice carried conviction, and her words seemed to resonate deeply with the audience. Joy sat back, lips pursed, offering no immediate comeback. The energy in the room was electric, almost like a live drama unfolding on stage. Sarah and Sunny exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with how far the exchange had gone. Lindsay, meanwhile, seemed to grow more empowered with each round of applause. She straightened her posture and told Joy directly that tearing people down wasn't journalism, it was cruelty masked as entertainment. The statement landed like a punch, and the audience roared in approval, clapping and shouting Lindsay's name. Joy attempted to regain her authority by saying she was simply asking the tough questions that the public wanted answered. Lindsay laughed bitterly and replied, "No, you're repeating old headlines. That's not tough, that's lazy." The crowd erupted, with some even standing again in support of Lindsay. The comment clearly stung, As Joy's smirk disappeared momentarily, the co-hosts looked increasingly tense, realizing the interview had slipped into a full confrontation that was now impossible to control. Lindsay then shifted the focus, speaking directly to viewers at home. She said she wanted people to know that no matter how many mistakes you've made, you deserve the chance to grow, to change, and to be respected. She reminded everyone that she was human before she was a celebrity, and her voice cracked slightly with emotion as she emphasized that no one should be defined forever by their lowest moments. The audience applauded warmly, and many nodded in agreement, visibly moved by her words. Joy, however, couldn't resist one final provocation. She leaned in and asked, "But how do we know this isn't just another performance?" The audience groaned loudly at the question, some even booing outright. Lindsay's eyes widened with disbelief, and she shook her head slowly. She responded, "If you think my life is a performance, then you're proving exactly why people stop sharing their truth." Her words cut deeply, and the studio erupted with clapping and shouts of support. Lindsay's composure cracked just slightly as she leaned back in her chair, visibly emotional but still holding firm. She explained that she had walked into The View expecting a conversation, not an interrogation. She said that she came prepared to inspire, but instead she was being dragged back into a past she had already outgrown. The audience murmured in agreement, and Joy remained silent, her face tight. The clash had become uncomfortable for everyone, and yet the viewers couldn't look away. Finally, Lindsay placed her microphone down on the table for a moment, took a deep breath, and then picked it back up. She turned to Joy and said firmly, "I don't need this." The audience gasped, recognizing the weight of her words. Joy blinked in surprise, perhaps realizing Lindsay was serious about ending the segment. Whoopi gestured nervously, trying to calm things, but Lindsay was already shifting in her chair, preparing for a decision that would overshadow everything else that morning. With the room in stunned silence, Lindsay stood up slowly. The audience erupted in shock, with some clapping and others shouting, "We love you, Lindsay." Joy sat frozen, unsure how to respond. Lindsay adjusted her outfit, looked at the audience, and smiled with gratitude. She thanked them for supporting her journey, emphasizing that their belief in her meant more than any criticism. Her voice was steady, and her decision was clear. She was walking away, refusing to endure another second of Joy's interrogation. The camera tried to follow her as she walked off, but producers quickly cut back to the table, where Joy, Whoopi, Sunny, and Sarah sat in stunned silence. Whoopi, trying to salvage the moment, muttered, "Well, that was unexpected." The audience buzzed with chatter, the energy crackling through the studio. Joy attempted a half-hearted joke to lighten the mood, but it fell flat, met with awkward silence. Lindsay's exit had left a gaping hole in the show, one that no quick pivot could fix. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled to manage the fallout. Reports later suggested Lindsay's team had warned the hosts beforehand not to focus excessively on her troubled past. The fact that Joy had ignored those guidelines only fueled Lindsay's anger. Staff members said Lindsay left the building immediately, surrounded by her team, and declined to return despite pleas from the producers. The walk-off was not stage 8, it was raw, unplanned, and very real, making it even more impactful. Social media exploded within minutes of the broadcast. Clips of Lindsay's fiery responses and dramatic exit were shared across platforms. Hashtags like #LindsayOnTheView, #JoyVSLindsay, and #LindsayWalksOff began trending globally. Fans praised Lindsay for defending herself and standing her ground, while critics accused Joy of bullying. The debate raged online, with people dissecting every word, every expression, and every moment of the confrontation. It quickly became one of the most talked about television moments of the year. Entertainment outlets picked up the story almost immediately. Headlines declared Lindsay's walk-off as both a power move and a train wreck television moment. Pundits debated whether Joy had gone too far or whether Lindsay had overreacted. Morning shows replayed the clip endlessly, each host offering their own take on what it meant. For Lindsay, the incident was both a headache and a blessing. It reopened old wounds but also proved her resilience and unwillingness to be disrespected on live television. Lindsay herself responded later that evening on social media. In a heartfelt post, she thanked her fans for their support and reiterated that she refused to be defined by her past mistakes. She wrote about choosing peace, growth, and authenticity, and promised her upcoming projects would speak louder than any criticism. Fans flooded her comments with love and encouragement. The post went viral, reframing the narrative from scandal to empowerment. Her decision to walk off had transformed into a statement of strength. Joy Behar, on the other hand, faced a storm of backlash. Critics accused her of badgering Lindsay and crossing the line between tough journalism and unnecessary cruelty. While Joy defended herself by claiming she was just doing her job, many felt her tone was dismissive and condescending. ABC reportedly fielded numerous complaints from viewers demanding Joy apologize. Though she remained defiant publicly, The network quietly acknowledged that the segment had not gone as planned and had caused significant controversy. Industry insiders began analyzing the deeper meaning of the clash. Many pointed out that Lindsay's reaction symbolized a larger issue: how celebrities, especially women, are often forced to relive their lowest moments for public entertainment. They argued that her refusal to play along marked a cultural shift, where stars no longer tolerate being reduced to tabloid caricatures. Lindsay's exit wasn't just about joy, it was about reclaiming control of her own story. It resonated deeply with fans who had faced judgment in their own lives. In the weeks that followed, the incident continued to dominate conversation. Lindsay's name was back in headlines, but this time not for scandal, for strength. She became a trending topic not because of mistakes but because of how fiercely she defended herself. Joy, meanwhile, was forced to weather the criticism, her reputation for sharp wit now shadowed by accusations of insensitivity. The View eventually moved on, but the moment had already become part of television history, destined to be replayed for years. Ultimately, Lindsay Lohan's walk-off was more than just a dramatic TV moment. It was a declaration of self-worth, a refusal to be diminished, and a reminder that celebrities are human beings first. By standing up to Joy Behar and choosing to walk away, Lindsay sent a powerful message: growth deserves respect, and no one should have to tolerate being defined forever by their past. The audience's cheers, the viral reaction, and the cultural discussion that followed ensured that her fiery confrontation will be remembered as one of the boldest moments in modern talk show history.